house prices, Bank of Mum and Dad. If the Bank of Mum and Dad was an actual bank, it would be in the top 10 banks in the world. So, any sympathy at all? Let's talk to two experts. James Bartholomew is the author of The Welfare of Nations, and Jonathan Davis is with us as well. A very good morning to you, to both. So can we start with you first, James? Could you define squeezed middle for me?
Well, they're obviously not in the squeezed middle because they're in the top 5% of high earners. But I think I should correct two things that you say in introduction, which are the things which have provoked people on social media into a hate storm, which is totally unfair. They never said they were struggling. They never asked for sympathy. So those are two total inaccuracies, which I think you should not go on repeating.
Oh, okay. Go ahead then. What do you have to say? We're just having a conversation, James. It's all right.
Yeah, I know, but it's these people have had a lot of social media hate, as you say.
Yes, no, I know that, and I know she slightly retracted it. It's a conversation. It's not meant to get too personal on their part, and I know they're struggling to get their child educated properly and live their life. So, do they have a point?
Do they have a point? Well, they have a point in this. I mean, this is what this is originally in a Financial Times article about how people who are high earners or middle earners find it more difficult to get the kind of lifestyle they used to get. And the reasons you've given earlier are absolutely the right ones, that house prices have rocketed. I bought my first house in Tooting in 1973 for $17,300.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the stamp duty now. In fact, the stamp duty would be more than that. So these people are living, if you look at the pictures, because the popular papers later went and photographed their house is not a grand house at all. It's in Croydon. Somebody in the top 5%, you'd expect to be able to afford a good house in central London.
Nice Beamer in the driveway, though, James. Yeah. Quoted as £36,000 or thereabout. They're not doing too badly, to be honest.
No, they're doing well. And I don't think, they've said in subsequent interviews, they know they're privileged. And they're working hard, and they're not asking for sympathy.
No. Okay.
What is true is that people in their position, high-earning people, have been hit by a succession of things, including a lot of changes made by this government. They were actually better off under the Blair government, but Osborne has cut away at a whole lot of little privileges that the high earners used to have. Relaxing tax relief for pensions, for example, removal of child benefit, removal of entitlement to children's vouchers, a requirement to pay nannies' pensions, school fees, as you say, up in real terms. Stamp duty has been dramatically increased. It's almost penal for anyone who's a high earner now. Extra stamp duty on second homes, more stamp duty on buy-to-let. I mean, there are a whole list of ways in which people haven't really noticed who aren't affected, in which the higher earners have been affected. No, they're not asking for sympathy or tears, but I think it's just a fact that their position is less good than it used to be.
No, absolutely, James. Good points. Let's put them to Jonathan Davis. He's an economist. He's a wealth manager as well, so he sees a bit of money coming through the door. No doubt he's got a little bit himself. Good morning to you, Jonathan. You've heard the case that James has made. Sympathy for somebody who describes themselves, perhaps a squeezed middle?
I wonder what the lady's motivation was in putting the message out that things are not as easy for them as they used to be. There's no doubt, and I think Mr. Bartholomew is painting a more sanguine picture here than perhaps could be seen, because she and her husband are doing exceptionally well. By all accounts, they paid tuppence for their house 16 years ago. It's gone up 3.5 times, so that's tax-free gains of £500,000. Thank you very much. And because it's over 16 years that they've had this house, they've probably paid off most of the mortgage. So from a £10,500 or so net income every month, they shell out, say, I don't know, £2,000 or £2,500 a month for childcare and schooling. That leaves them with at least £8,000 a month to live the life of Riley. So let's get that clear first of all. They're doing exceptionally well. However, what I do agree with is the cost of living is horrendous. this particular couple are not the squeezed middle. They're at the top end. There's no question, 200 grand. But if they were on, say, 80,000 a year, living in London, and they had, in the last few years, not the last 20 years, last few years, bought a house with a massive debt, then they'd be toast economically, currently and in the future. They'd have absolutely no way of building a nest egg for their retirement. And indeed, they would probably have overbought the property, because after a 50-year bull market, house prices are very fragile at this point.
Okay, Jonathan, just for a second, I'm going to ask you both to define where middle income begins. I'm going to start with you, James Bartholomew, author of The Welfare of Nations. And I'll just, by the way, interest rates at the moment are about 1.1 to sort of 2%. You can get those sorts of rates with that sort of income. And I remember paying 15%, James, when my first place was nearby to you in Tooting, and I bought it for about 55. So I was taking that point earlier on. I just wanted to put that across. So where does middle income these days begin?
I forget what the median is. I think it's about 27,000 per person. If you have two people, obviously that makes just under £60,000. So I think that's where the middle is.
27 to 60, you say?
Yeah, 27 for one person.
Yeah.
If you have a couple, then that makes double that, which is just under 60,000.
And what's the definition of poor, James?
Poor? Well, God, that's a hell of a subject. Mum, if you want a question of whether you take the old definition or the new one.
No, just a personal feeling from you.
What?
A personal feeling.
Well, my feeling of what is genuinely poor or in poverty are people who cannot afford properly to clothe themselves or to feed themselves and to get shelter. Because I've been aware of the third world all my life, I resent and dislike the redefinition as relative poverty, where people with a mobile phone can be defined as being in poverty. That is not, by third world standards, that is not in poverty. That is an insult to people who are actually in real poverty.
James, thank you very much indeed. Jonathan, where does middle income begin and what's the range?
It depends where you are in the country. If you're in the northeast of England, you could be on the minimum wage and probably in the middle. And live reasonably comfortably. But of course, as I said, in London, or Croydon, London, whatever, if the joint income is less than 60,000 a year, then particularly if, as I say, you've bought a house just in the last few years, then yes, you're going to be struggling. And £60,000 a year is an enormous amount of money relative to even just 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think the big difference is not the tax minutiae that was discussed earlier. The big difference has got to be the cost of accommodation.
Yeah.
Whether you're renting or whether you're paying, borrowing a vast mortgage. That's the difference.
Yeah.
And we should note that in the last 25 years, average real incomes against inflation have hardly changed for the median, the rump, the 50% in the middle. It's hardly changed in 25 years.
Jonathan, I've got to stop you there. You're an economist and wealth manager. Thank you for your views. James Bartholomew, thank you as well for starting this conversation.